And so, we've talked prior to today, you really like doing the trial work. You really like doing it. Some people really like doing it. Some people don't. They want to build an operation that does other things. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you sort of built your operation so that you can do trial work because that's what you like doing.
Yeah, I think part of what we want to do is be able to have enough cases. In reality, only a small percentage of cases actually make it to trial, like a jury trial. And where I feel most alive practicing is when I'm sitting there picking a jury, speaking with it. And I think that really goes back to when I sold car radios or installed them, dealing with the public and our family. I feel like one of the gifts that I have is that I can speak to a lot of different people and identify with a lot. I may not be the smartest legal scholar out there, but I think I understand people. And our practice is around getting kind of enough fish in the pond, so to speak, that we can find the good cases to try and try those cases and then raise the bar from there. So if you try a good case and get a good verdict, certainly you're going to be at a point where your cases, who may not be what we would consider for your great cases, can certainly raise the number for those other clients as well. And that's kind of our goal.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview law firm founders, find out about their journeys and the lessons and wisdom they've learned along the way. Today's guest is Chris Rod. He is a personal injury lawyer from, I'll say, Southwest Georgia. He can fill in the geography better in terms of how far of a reach his firm sort of reaches down there. Chris, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me. Excited to be here.
So tell us about your firm, what you do, where you are.
Yeah, so we're a personal injury firm and based out of Thomasville, Georgia, which is about as far south as you can get in Georgia. We're 8 miles from the Florida line. Geographically, if you're thinking about it, it's just right above Tallahassee, Florida. A lot of people know where that is, home of the Florida State Seminoles. So we're in Thomasville. We've got an office in Valdosta, Georgia, which is also on the line, furthest, almost the first city south on I-75. And then we've got an office that we're moving forward with in Albany, where I grew up, that area, Leesburg, Georgia. And so we'll have the Southwest Georgia cornered, I guess, here shortly.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at a map of Georgia, are you basically covering in terms of offices and or courthouses that you sort of run in that whole southwestern corner?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way to look at it. If you kind of look, we're not as high as Columbus or Macon, but, we kind of just south of there where Albany is and a little north, those counties surrounding. And if you look at I-75, kind of west towards Alabama, we cover that. Occasionally we'll get some stuff over the eastern side of the state that we'll work on towards Brunswick, St. Simons, that area. But, it's a little less populated over that way, so we don't quite get as much. But so it's kind of interesting. It's nice to be in this area. Hot.
And so we met, I lose track of time, man, but we met a number of years ago, I think right as you started your firm, and you've had a lot of growth since then. So why don't you tell us what you were like when you started and what the firm looks like now in terms of people and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and how we met, obviously, you helped me through untangling a previous partnership I had, and we really appreciate that. You did a great job doing that. But when I started my firm, we were just solely personal injury. I took one paralegal with me. I had a part-time bookkeeper who was remote, and I had a part-time nurse who was remote, and that was it, and myself. And now we have 4 attorneys working for the firm. We've got about eight different paralegals and litigation assistants and still growing. So every day is a new challenge getting there. And we started the firm back in August of 2019. And so we sit here in 2026. Went through COVID. It wasn't 6 months after that, and we were in COVID, so.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. That is tremendous growth. And I imagine maybe fill in too. We hear about, or I read about, the rural areas all across America. There are not enough lawyers in the rural areas, and there's sort of the population is shrinking a little bit. Maybe speak to that, but then also, I imagine you're seeing that, and to have the growth on top of that, how's that affected it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Law is getting so much more specialized, and I think I've seen some of those comments about, hey, rural America is underserved. We have a lot of little small counties and towns in this area who just, maybe they have 2 or 3 lawyers in the city, and they can't all do injury cases, or they can't all do real estate closings or that kind of thing. So we've been able to grow, I think, just because obviously geographically we're hitting 3 different cities and pulling from those areas, but all the little cities in between. And then, before I did just solely personal injury, I did some criminal work as well. Traveled the circuit. We operate in circuits down here, typically a 5-county circuit. So if you're in 2 circuits, you're in 10 counties easily. So you can get a name and you can get at least a reputation for yourself. So that's helped a lot over the years,
So I do want to circle back and talk about niching down in the rural areas. But before we go there, I want to go back. Why'd you become a lawyer? What were you doing before going to law school?
Well, so what really happened was I wasn't a very good high school student, and I barely got into college. And then when I got into college, I started doing well and making A's and B's, and actually got an associate's in Spanish, which is an odd thing because I know I have a very thick Southern accent, but I spent a summer in Costa Rica and ended up at the University of Georgia, but got a teaching certificate, which is really ironic because I probably wasn't the best high school student. But when I got out of teaching, or got finished with my teaching degree, I went and taught drafting and architecture. It used to be the old industrial arts. People think about shop class or metals class or stuff. That's kind of changed to what they call technology education. But so we learned drafting, and I did that for a year, and then I went back in my family business, a low voltage contract. We'd install church sound systems or alarm systems or closed circuit TVs, and did that. And while I was doing that, I just felt like I had the need to go back and get an extra degree. And I kind of had this, I wanted to get a master's or some type of postgraduate degree. And so my option was go to law school or either go into construction management. And I ended up choosing law school, took the LSAT. And I said, well, I can probably do this or do business afterwards. And anyway, just kind of fell in love with it. Love with trial work, got involved with mock trial and law review and all that kind of stuff.
So you mentioned Costa Rica. I think we pieced together that we were down there at the same time. I was down there, I think, the same summer you were.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't realize it was the same summer. I remember us piecing together.
I think it might have been, man, which is funny. It's funny. I wonder who else was down there that we know.
26 years ago. So
yeah,
wow. But it's a cool place. I've been back a bunch of times. So
yeah, I love it. We just went a couple months ago. And I had been back since, that was the first time back in like 26 years or whatever. So awesome, 27 years, something like that. But so another thing you did, you mentioned, I'd forgotten about this. We'll get back to your law firm in a minute, but you served on a school board down there. Why'd you do that, man?
Nothing like local politics, huh? So there was a lawyer in town I litigated against, and his kids had gone through the system. And he was kind of ready to get off the school board. He'd been there for 20-something years and asked me, he said, hey, I'm going to get off. Would you like to at least put your name in the hat about doing it? And I felt like it was a good opportunity. I've considered politics before and those kind of things, but there's nothing like a local politics, especially when you're dealing with people's children.
Oh, man.
And then, everybody gets a little bit more excited and passionate and bold about it, but it was a fun experience. And what I tell people oftentimes, it's really nice to have a seat at the table. There's a lot of things that go on in local politics that you can't always, there's some things that are protected by, closed door sessions and that kind of stuff. But so not everybody or not the general public knows everything that has to deal with personnel or something like that. But I think the people try to get it right, and the people there, you have to love doing it because it's an unpaid position. It takes a lot of time. And when I did come off, my cell phone minutes went way down, so it was always something, but it was always nice, So.
I tell people there are 2 positions that are not just a no, but a hell no for me. One of them is school board. And the other one is an HOA board member. It's like,
Well, that seat's come up. I actually moved out of the district, and then I moved back in the same district. The seat's come up once or twice since I've been gone, and people have asked me if I was going to put my name back in the hat, and I said, nah, I think I'll let somebody else do it.
now, I do think in Georgia, maybe the best political office would be like a state rep, because no one really, I mean, everybody locally knows you, but you can blame everybody else if something doesn't happen. It's a small enough district, so you don't have to meet too many constituents. You know.
Yeah, we can just fuss about the people in Atlanta when we're down here in the South. You know,
Exactly.
what are the people they're doing? They don't know what goes on down there, and we've been working on them. But I guess in retrospect, it could be that you're not getting anything done up in Atlanta for us either. So, you know.
Now, we'll say I worked at the General Assembly for a session, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago. And there were some small town lawyers that were largely solos that were there. And you have to take, 3-4 months out of the year to go do that. And I remember we'd be in committee meetings and I'd see them on their laptops, like drafting pleadings, because when they were away, they weren't making any money. So that you've built a team now. So I guess you could probably be okay, but it's tough.
Yeah, I still draft some stuff, but fortunately, we've been able to get involved, and I probably didn't say this earlier. I get appellate lawyers involved who are pretty much on staff. I met with one this morning who really handle our motion practice, and I do a lot of premises work, so we're all the time fighting summary judgment motions. And I think since the law changed recently with tort reform, that we're getting a lot more motions to dismiss, early on in case. So it can be a challenge, but I wouldn't want to be up in Atlanta, I don't think, for 3 months and not be here at my law firm for that amount of time. That doesn't sound like a good plan right at this moment in my life.
Yeah, that'd be tough. All right, so let's go back. So you went to law school, you came out. Where did you start? What kind of firm did you start at? Did you come back to where you are now, or did you go somewhere else?
So I clerked a couple of years in Jacksonville, went to Florida Coastal Law, and then I had an offer from there. But I came back to Thomasville, where my wife is from, and worked in an old kind of historic firm called Wires, Splatburn and Warren. Mr. Whitehurst, he had passed away by the time I got there, but his uncles were from Thomasville. Mr. Whitehurst actually read into the law. So his uncles were the Hay brothers. They had a downtown law firm. They did a lot of stuff, and they took their nephew in during the Great Depression, and he read into the law and apprenticed, and they created this firm, and it had been there for like over 100 years, and so they had a pretty good clientele. We didn't represent like insurance companies or anybody. We just represented kind of the people of Thomas County and in the area, but we were a general practice firm, so you got to do criminal stuff one morning, go sit in a closing in the afternoon, real estate close in the afternoon, and then go handle a 341 hearing for bankruptcy the next day. Like it was kind of always something different. But so I always did the trial work with them. The two local partners did some trial work as well, but I always did the criminal practice and then personal injury cases. And my clerking in Jacksonville was a personal injury firm as well, so I had a little experience.
So doing all this practice areas in a small town, and I've heard others talk about it, it just raises my anxiety level. I mean, because, it's at least me personally, I feel like it's hard to really learn how to do one thing well, and you're constantly flipping between different types of things.
Yeah, I think you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. But fundamentally what we do for people is we work out people's problems. They have a problem and want a solution, whether it's a divorce or whether it's a injury case, and a lot of it ends up being a negotiation. You have to get in the right posture procedurally to do that. But there are areas, I guess how we sectioned it off. Everybody kind of had their areas. I was criminal and personal injury, and the other guys maybe workers' comp and family law, and so we had some areas, and then we kind of crossed over with one another as the firm needed to cover hearings and that kind of things. But you learn a little bit about a lot of stuff, which helps you in your practice today. So people still come up with all kinds of different issues, even if you're handling personal injury matter. Just like yesterday, somebody's house was being foreclosed on an issue, and we're able to at least answer some questions and point them in the right direction. So that's helpful. But it is a challenge.
Yeah. So you start at this firm, you work up, you become a partner. But at some point you say, all right, I think I want to do this on my own. Take me through the thought process of thinking, hey, I'd rather go out on my own than stay here at this general practice firm?
Yeah, it could be just my age. I was turning 40 that year that I decided to leave. And then it was a choice. Had been there, had become a partner, knew the firm. I think my partners and I all got along. That wasn't an issue. But then it came a choice for me is, did I really, at some point, they were a little older. They're actually both in their 80s now. So we're talking they were late 70s. And did I really want to hire lawyers to do everything that they were doing or we were doing, or would we just niche down? And at some point I came to a realization, why don't you just niche down yourself and go do exactly what you want to do? You've been doing, working for everybody else and doing these other things, all these different practice areas. And you just need to, at some point, just figure out what you want to do, and what do you want to get out and do every day? And the beauty of the way we've done it and starting all deal, everybody here is rowing in the same direction. Everybody understands the process, understands what the goals are, versus, having to find the right paralegal to answer this question or get this pleading done. Everybody here is kind of doing those same thing, the same thing every day.
So how was it telling them, hey, I'm leaving? You got a small town, aren't many lawyers down there, I imagine. And
Yeah.
you're like, it's been fun, but we're breaking up and I'm going to go down the street and do my own thing.
Well, I will say I don't advise it to do it the same way that I did it. There were some lessons learned in that. But to complicate matters, one of my partners was my father-in-law too. So, not only did you leave the office, but you're making some division somewhat in the family. Fortunately, my wife was on board. But I walked in on a Monday. I never stopped my performance about what I was doing for the firm. I always continued. I thought I had this inkling want to do it, but I always continued to take the depositions, move cases along. Revenue never dropped off. I didn't quit doing the things that you need to do as I would be expected to do as a partner. When I started considering, I reached out to a couple of trusted friends/advisors about it, say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Is that the right thing to do? And they said, yeah. One of them said, I'm surprised you hadn't done it before this time. And I was like, well, okay, but I haven't, but I'm here. And then I presented them an opportunity just to, hey, this is what I think, how this thing might go. I think where my mistake was is I walked in on a Monday and said, hey, guys, it's been real and it's been fun, but I'll be out by next Monday. And that was like, wick. And I think everybody's lip hit the floor. And then, I think ultimately that was a mistake. And I can honestly say it, not because of you have to unravel somehow, but I think it can cloud people's vision about what your true intentions are. And really my true intention was just to go do my own thing, and it ultimately worked out, probably prolonged the division of everything and getting it done a little longer, because of that. But at some point you gotta cut the cord too. So, it is what it is. Lesson learned.
And so part of it was because you wanted to really niche down and do your only one practice area, basically. Did you always just want to run your own shop? Did you have some sort of entrepreneurial bug that just you needed to go do, or what?
Well, I do have a little bit of an entrepreneur bug. I think I have a probably self-diagnosed ADHD. I have a lot of irons in the fire, but also, I grew up in a family business where my dad ran the show, and I saw a lot of that. I saw the good and the bad with that, and at some point you feel like, hey, can I do it? Can I do it on my own? And certainly that firm had stood up for a long, long time. Partners have been there a long, long time. And as a partnership, we could do it together, and we did, but there would be always that question, could you do it on your own? And I think I needed to answer that. Now we're sitting here 6 years later, or almost 7, August will be 7, and we're here,
You're doing well too, doing real well, which is awesome.
Thank you.
It's funny you said you grew up in a family with a small business or owned a business. I've talked to others that have grown up similar situations, and it's usually one of two camps. They're like, I'm never going to start my own business, or I just have to go start my own business.
Yeah. My dad would probably, my dad wasn't, I don't think, really in favor of me going to law school at first. I mean, he wanted me to take over his business, and I think that was the plan, but I really felt like I needed to go somewhere. And then later on, after I got done with law school and actually kind of came full circle, he told me he was really proud of what I did. And that was a lot, coming from your dad, who I had to go in one Sunday evening and say, hey, by the way, I'm leaving. I guess I got a history of that. But when you own your own show, you can't just do that. You gotta show up every day. But it can be stressful, but it also can be very rewarding too.
All right, let's switch back. So part of the reason you left, you wanted to sort of ditch the general practice and really focus on a niche area. And we sort of talked about it a little bit, but the talk has always been, and I've heard from others, that if you're in a smaller town or in a rural area, you really cannot niche down because there's just not enough. There's not enough people, not enough cases. Did you have any concerns about that, and what's been your experience?
Well, I did. I joke with people, and I don't know if I can say it on here, but I just said, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to go work for the people. And Morgan & Morgan, and those are the competitors. There's always moving in these markets and that kind of stuff. But I guess I'm living proof you can niche down. I was completely uncertain, but it actually opened up some doors for us because, as a general practice, we were sitting there and we would still do real estate closings, or we would do X number of X, but really opened up my referral relationship with lawyers who did like banking or did other things. They didn't really want to send me their personal injury clients because maybe I would end up figuring out who their caseload was and get their real estate closings after that or something like that. And so it really just opened that area up for referrals, but it also made you seem like you were really the expert in the field. You just weren't just taking one-off cases. You were the guy who handled these regularly every day and stayed up on the law, and they didn't have to worry about, me going to dive into the other things as well. So you get to really be known as the expert. So that's nice. It's nice and being on these things too helps,
Yeah. So Joe Freed, Joe, I'm sure, trucking lawyer in Atlanta. He came on a while back and we talked about, when he went out and said, I'm a trucking lawyer, he said everybody in Atlanta, which is a bigger city, thought he was crazy. And they were like, there's not enough cases. There's not enough cases. And his view is, and I think I agree with him, is that if you hyper focus or niche down, then you can expand your geography as well. And that's one way to get more cases. And, we talked about you're in, Thomasville, but you're covering, you have offices in multiple cities now and you're covering a wider area. Did you expand because you needed get more cases, or it's just hey, there's opportunity and let's do it?
So the Valdosta office is in our circuit. We try cases over there. I've had a jury trial over there in January, and it's not our office is literally next door to the courthouse, so that's nice. We go by there during lunch or afterwards and have meetings, etc. But there was an intentional thought about it. You've got to have some Google presence, and then Albany, where we're opening our office there, we own the building. It's actually where my dad's electronics store was, and so we had the building. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm from Albany, and then Doherty County is pretty known for their verdicts up there as well. The pretty liberal in that area. So but I want to be where I grew up and knew, and be from the community. So I think I can make those connections with those areas. I'm not up in Atlanta trying to steal cases, but you talk about niching down too. So, I get cases from, because I do a lot of premises work, I get cases from kind of all over. I handle some over in Waycross, over towards Brunswick, for even injury lawyers who don't really do premises work because they're pretty intense with the appellate practice and the brief writing, et cetera. So we just work on those things,
And so, we've talked prior to today, you really like doing the trial work. You really like doing it. Some people really like doing it. Some people don't. They want to build an operation that does other things. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you sort of built your operation so that you can do trial work because that's what you like doing.
Yeah, I think part of what we want to do is be able to have enough cases. In reality, only a small percentage of cases actually make it to trial, like a jury trial. And where I feel most alive practicing is when I'm sitting there picking a jury, speaking with it. And I think that really goes back to when I sold car radios or installed them, dealing with the public and our family. Like, I feel like one of the gifts that I have is that I can speak to a lot of different people and identify with a lot. I may not be the smartest legal scholar out there, but I think I understand people. And our practice is around getting kind of enough fish in the pond, so to speak, that we can find the good cases to try and try those cases and then raise the bar from there. So if you try a good case and get a good verdict, certainly you're going to be at a point where your cases, who may not be what we would consider as lawyers great cases, can certainly raise the number for those other clients as well. And that's kind of our goal. I know, Joe Freed and his firm, met him several times, actually worked kind of with him on a different case, or his firm on a different case. And he's right, niching down, but you expand your geography, but you gotta have the cases to go try. He's successful because he gets those cases in the door, and then he builds a reputation that helps all his cases. So that's important for us.
So let's talk about that. How do you get your cases? What sorts of things do you do? Are you a man of the people? You're on the school board? Is that how cases come in, or?
Well, being in Thomasville for 20 years, it helps. I had a case where a young man was seriously injured a couple of weekends ago, and I was actually out of the office, and they called and came in, and it looked like it came in from Google, but his mother, I'd actually represented his mother probably 10 or 12 years ago, so in this small of town, you start representing the same people over and over, the families. So there's that word of mouth referral from other lawyers. We do have a Google presence and work on Google SEO and all of those. We have a firm that does that. And then, that's probably, mainly where, we try to, we're not big TV lawyers or I don't have any billboards, so, and I've always thought, well, should I or not, and I just hadn't gone down that. You can't do everything. What I have learned working with our group, with Ben Glass and Brian Glass, is, direct mail. We're working on that. And then over the next probably 6 months to a year, we're really working on building out our YouTube channel and creating some resources, not only for our clients, but for the community to really dive into to know how we can help. So, we're in brand recognition with social media, but a lot of our clients either come from Google or referral from lawyers or previous clients or referral from a previous client. So.
And that's the thing. And when I've talked about it on this podcast with others, I mean, in marketing and in business development, I mean, virtually everything works to some extent. Many, 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 many things work. And then you bump in, especially in groups like we're in, you get in there and some of the people are doing 20 sophisticated sort of things very well. And right. You first get in there, you're like, oh my God, there's no way. I'm not even doing one of those things well. How in the world?
Oh, for some, yeah, it's crazy.
And so it's just, you just knock down one and then you knock down the next one and then you start to see, at least I have seen from my experience, they all sort of almost amplify each other at some point once you get a critical mass. And people are hearing you from different ways and through different channels. And basically, I mean, I think the goal really is you can go pay for billboards and radio to be everywhere at once, or you can build it more organically to be everywhere at once, or at least you want people to think you're everywhere. Everywhere they turn around, they see, your face or your name, right?
Yeah, well, one thing that we do, I kind of look at the marketing in three different buckets. One is kind of this digital world that you have your SEO, you have your YouTube, you have your social media, and where people can find you in that digital world. And they're experts on that, great vendors on that, et cetera. And then you've got this other part that I think sets us apart is that community version, okay? And like, for instance, when we started in this firm, we're right across the street from a big park, city park, and we started what we call the turkey toss. And so it birthed out of the idea of me and my neighbor would every Wednesday before Thanksgiving would smoke a bunch of turkeys for the neighborhood, right? For people in the neighborhood. Bring whatever you got, we'll smoke stuff. And when we moved here, I just said, hey, Clark, what if we just smoke 100 turkeys and give them all away? And he's like, okay, we could do that. So I went down to Walmart and I bought 100 turkeys, like a pallet of turkeys, and put them in the back of my pickup truck. And I found some cooler to let them thaw out, and we just smoked 100 turkeys and gave them all away. And we've been doing this year will be the 7th year. We added a pack a sack party where we have a band, and we packed non-perishables on the Monday night before in that community give back. So And what our plan is obviously we're doing that here, but as we grow into Valdosta and Albany more, we'll do a local community event for them as well. And you can't get that on a billboard. You can't get that, and it's great. We have over 500 people involved between either receiving a turkey, getting a turkey, or nominating for a turkey, or packing the boxes, or whatever form, volunteering at the event every Thanksgiving. And it's just because I love Thanksgiving and smoking turkeys, so. There's a question whether we're going to do 250 this year because Thomasville turns 250 and they want people to do 250, something involving 250. So we'll see. I'll kind of get everybody on board to do that.
Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Life Cycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Life Cycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. How long and what kind of operation you have to actually smoke that many turkeys? It's got to be incredible, huge.
So 100 turkeys, we do between really about 110, 120. We did almost 150 this year. We got 8 or 10 smokers, and they're these big trailer smokers, and they put them on, and we, obviously when they get out there, start at 7 in the morning, we're done smoking them and get them out by 5 in the afternoon. So it's a several hour deal. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too. So
I like it. The turkey toss. Do you get T-shirts made?
Oh yeah, I'll send you one.
Send me one, man. That's awesome.
We got videos too, and in our hallway we got all the T-shirts here. So I'll shoot you a couple pictures of that. So it's kind of cool.
Awesome. The turkey toss, it reminds me of the mullet toss. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, people didn't know what it was. Somebody came up, somebody was working on the marketing, came up with that intern or whatever, and she said, "What do we call it? Turkey toss." And people thought we were like literally throwing turkeys, but it's turned out to be an event what we're known for. So.
And for those listeners who aren't from South Alabama, on the border of Alabama and Florida, there's a place called the Floribama, and they have an annual mullet toss competition where they throw fish, and it is huge deal. If you haven't been, you should go check it out. So you can start tossing turkeys next year.
Or we'll start rolling them like bowling ball, keep a few of them frozen or something, So.
People go get hurt. You gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Get your insurance.
Don't need any new clients that way.
Yeah, exactly. So circling back, so another interesting thing in your background is that you personally were in a pretty serious car wreck a number of years ago. And I'm curious, how was that and what was that like in terms of influencing the way you practice now and the way you relate to your clients and the things they go through?
Yeah, in 2012, I was on my way to court, got up really early to head to Dublin, Georgia, which was about 2.5, 3 hours away. And I'd almost gotten there one county away, and I was coming right through a school zone area, slowed down, and a young kid turned in directly in front of me, and obviously T-boned her, airbags, totaled the car, all of these things, and ended up making court that morning. I was 5 minutes late, but I got ridden one deputy to the county line to another deputy or whatever, and then came back, but ended up needing a back surgery a year later. And I swore I'd never get back surgery before that, but it was just unbearable. And I ended up in my own personal injury case. Had to go hire a lawyer, able to get part of it resolved, but we still had to go up to Bleckley County to get the remainder part resolved. And I spoke about this a little bit ago, or a month or so ago at GTLA, but ended up getting home cooked. And we got a defense verdict on a clear liability case with a back surgery. And I don't know if that was because of me, but home cooking was a real thing in Bleckley County. But it was interesting because you sit through these depositions as the client, and you sit through the trial as a client, and you get called this dirty, cheating liar. And all I've done, in my opinion, is try to help people with their problems each and every day, was trying to help somebody that day. And then, and whatever the jury wants to do is fine. There was a lot of relief just getting the case resolved, but it gave me a lot of perspective about how people want to get their case resolved, or when nothing's happening on their case, that's their one case. We have hundreds sitting in the office, right? So you're sitting there with cases, you're doing something every day on somebody's case, but you may not be doing it on that one person's case, or you may be waiting on a judge's order from that other person's case. And it came really alive to me that what that delay felt like, and then also what it felt like to sit there and listen to all the lies of the defense and that kind of stuff. It gave me a pretty good perspective, at least to advise clients on. So it was interesting. I've gotten where I can talk about it a little bit more now. It was a stressful point of life, but I was really glad to get it resolved and have a resolution either way. So
I imagine in some of your client meetings, just relating that story goes a long way, particularly, maybe not all, but many personal injury clients, they are very demanding. Some of them have inflated expectations. A lot, they think they're going to come in your office today and try the case tomorrow and get a big check the next day. And so, being able to tell them, hey, I was in your seat and this is the way it went down, I would imagine goes a long way in helping with the client expectations.
yeah, and to give them a real clear picture about what it feels like to sit in that courtroom at a trial. Like, let's say you got a great offer on a case or a decent offer on a case, and you're trying to make that decision about, do I want to go to trial and really go through all that? And they might be saying, yeah, but then I might be saying, well, let me tell you what it's going to feel like, because I can tell them that, from my own experience. And I think it certainly buys you credibility with them, but I think that's also, though, too, my personality. I ended up in that section because I was kind of forced. In a way, I wasn't forced to take the case or move on with my personal case, but just the way that we ended up at a trial. They wanted a trial. The defense, wanted a trial against me. They knew who I was. I've been on the other side of them, et cetera, even the defense lawyer. And so, but, I was okay with it. It didn't hurt my feelings any. And when you have clients, like when we're trying to decide whether to go to trial or not, I'm okay with them going to trial. That's what I love to do. But I also want to give them that perspective of, hey, this may not go exactly the way you think it's going to go. And no trial really does. You can script it as much as you want, but just be yourself, authentic, and go for it.
So what was that like sitting in the client chair in trial when you're used to being the one actually trying the case? Are you over there scribbling notes, say, ask this, do that, or are you just trying to be calm and let them run the show?
You're worried about anything you might say or do that might be offensive to somebody, or, you get those same feelings about when they're spouting lies on some other thing. You're like, that's not what happened, or that's, you feel those things. So the emotion behind that is real, but staying calm in those things, it was good practice anyway. So it's hard to describe. It's really hard to describe, but it was real.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, man, let's pivot again. We'll move to your hobbies. You're a pilot. You like to fly planes. So how did you get into that?
Well, back in 2012, I was sitting at the office and I was really just needed an outlet. But my grandfather was a pilot, World War II, and then in Berlin Airlift. And I flew with him when I was young. He had offered when I was young, when I was 16, I didn't take him up on it. And, on getting the lessons done and getting my pilot's license. And so, but in 2012, I said I was tired of practicing law. Not completely, but I needed an outlet. And so I started taking lessons. So it was a lot of fun. I fell in love with it and got my instrument rating, got my commercial rating. Still fly quite a bit. Fly this weekend, take my son to camp. But it's just up there, that's all you can think about. You got to safely manage that airplane, and there's something glorious about that. So,
Well, I imagine when the weather's nice, it's very convenient to be able to hop in your own plane and fly somewhere instead of having to drive to an airport, do all the security, do all that stuff.
yeah, from Thomasville, Georgia, you can either drive to Macon, which is, everybody knows where Macon is in Georgia, right in the center of the state, and it takes you 2.5 hours, or you can fly 2.5 hours and be down in the Bahamas. You decide. So I think your choice. What do you want to do? So I choose to go south sometimes.
So another thing that interests me about your flying, we were in a meeting, I don't know, it was a month or so ago, and, meeting the lawyers, and everybody's presenting issues and problems, and we all get to sort of give our take on it and maybe give some advice. And you gave some really good advice that you pulled from Flying the Plane, and it was, something about trust your instruments. And I was like, what does he mean? And then you explained it. So why don't you explain what you mean by that? And maybe, are there other things that you can take from your time flying that apply to life or to the firm?
Yeah, I think the discussion that we had was around, we had this lawyer in there and he had all this data, and his data was telling him one thing, but he kind of felt like he wasn't sure and that kind of stuff. And one of the things they teach you, especially in instrument, when you're getting your instrument ratings, is that everything has some redundancy, okay? And so if this instrument's not working, then you got two others that you can compare it to figure out what the status of the airplane is, especially in a cloud. You can't tell what's up or down or anything when you get in a cloud. It's really eerie. And where we're at is that I said, man, you got the data, just trust it. Trust your instruments. Trust that the data that you've got is correct. If you got good data, obviously. And he did, And I think that's where we come back in is like, running a firm, you can't just do it solely on gut. You get it wrong, you end up upside down, You got to oh, I don't feel like the phone's ringing enough. Well, you look at your year, you're up 20% in cases. Well, maybe it is. It's just not ringing today, and you might not feel like everything's going in the right direction. But if you look at those instruments, so to speak, that data that you've got, then I think you can really put some trust in that, So I don't know. I think that's wise. And I think that happens with everyday life, too, There's a lot of things that go on as, is the data you're getting for your life in order as well, So get ATC to help you. So, call for help sometimes, We forget that. As a student pilot, which is really cool, is if you get in a situation, you can't get in any trouble as a student pilot unless you crash, obviously. But if you're coming in the airport, you can announce, hey, I'm a student pilot. Basically, I'm a newbie here. Can you help me? And you can't get cited by the FAA. You can't get anything like that because you're still learning. And I think a lot of times, even as you're doing your firm or starting out as a new lawyer or whatever that is, relying on those people, or even our mentorship groups, relying on those people to help guide you, because we're all still learning every day, And so I think those are kind of some practical things for life as well.
And so let's circle back to your firm. You started it, was it 6-7 years ago now? And you've had great growth. I'm not asking you to share numbers, but let's just, for the audience, you're doing really well, and you've had a lot of growth. What do you attribute that growth to? Is there anything that you can say, yeah, this thing here really helped, or is it a combination of things?
I'm just the best there is. No.
Or is it just luck? You're just lucky.
It'll be luck. I think, showing up every day, that we have moved through employees over the years. We've been able to attract some really great employees who've stayed with us. We pay them well. We pay them a nice bonus every year of those things, and pay them above the market. But you got to find really those A players. And I think that's, people say you're really in the HR department when you're sitting in the CEO seat. You're trying to attract that top talent. I think niching down, getting really good, even within our personal injury world, people got medical malpractice, and they got nursing home cases, and then strange appellate issues and stuff like that. Finding people who can do those things and do them really well, you end up winning more. I associate some people on some nursing home cases. They come in the door, or there might be something similar that we're looking at, but there's some lawyers I work with down here to help. So I think getting that helps you get the results and the reputation that matters, that people want to trust you, So
let's talk real quick about the premises cases. And I've talked to other lawyers that do premises cases here in Georgia. And for the listeners, about a year ago or so, the state of Georgia passed a massive tort reform package that basically eliminated, that claim almost. It's still technically there, but it's really hard to do. And so how has that impacted your firm, and how have you pivoted, or what are your thoughts on pivoting away from those cases if it's necessary?
Yeah, so a lot of those negligent security cases are what really got impacted. We still do a lot of fall cases, and that's when I say premises. We do a lot of that. So those really haven't changed a whole lot. I do see a lot more motions to dismiss and things early on for whatever reason, but we'll have some negligent security. In fact, we had one that happened right before the law changed, so that one's moving forward. But I'm still kind of looking at the landscape about how those are going to be. Fortunately, down in Thomasville and in this area, we don't have too many of like the shootings and the things like that at hotels, burned down hotels, and all these different stuff that the population drives in the Atlanta area. So fortunately for premises cases, like I said, we do a lot of fall cases, slip and fall, trip and fall, that kind of stuff, other hazards. So we've been able to move them. Now, it has changed the way you try them a little bit, depending on, liability first or how you present damages in the courtroom. I got an issue up on appeal on that. So we're still ferreting some of that out, but I think it'll get resolved, But a lot of the security cases aren't going forward anymore, so you got to pivot.
And I will say trial lawyers are good at that. They're good at that.
If
you can try a case, there will be cases that come across your desk, right?
There was always there was one old joke that said, what do you call one lawyer in a small town? And they say, poor. And I said, what do you call two lawyers in a small town? You call them both rich because they got somebody to fuss with. So I don't know if that's a good joke or bad joke, but it's you got to have somebody to disagree with, I guess.
So for others out there, and let's focus on small town lawyers, since that's what you've experienced, that are starting a firm or trying to grow their firm. What kind of advice would you give them as they're trying to embark on the journey to grow their practice?
I think that's a good question. I think being involved in the community and setting yourself apart is important. I think one of the things that helped me a lot is I got out of the small town and went to a lot of CLEs, went to a lot of opportunities, workshops, and learned from people who had experiences or more experience than I had. And then you bring that back and you're kind of like the expert there now, like they can trust you. And then like I said, I keep leaning back on some of these appellate lawyers we use, but it's really nice to show up with a really well-written brief that is going to survive appellate scrutiny later on for a trial judge who's maybe not dealing with your issue very much. I spoke about that a while back, is that, not every one of these judges, they might be dealing with a divorce case, 3 days a week, might have a real estate matter, and then they come up with this personal injury case, and they haven't stayed up to date on the nuance of the law or the change in the tort reform or how that's going to affect the actual trial or something like that. So when giving them that briefing, giving them that something that looks great and they could check it and it is right, and it's not hallucinations from AI, I think that goes a long way to building credibility in the town and in the courtroom as well. So I think that's important. Make sure you do that.
I want to piggyback and dive a little deeper on the getting out of your geography. I mean, even in Atlanta, the state of Georgia, I'll say, you go to these lawyer events, I'll just call them the traditional bar events. Everybody's doing it the same way. There are not that many innovators. I don't know if the GTLA events are maybe a little better. But then, you go to like the group we're in or some of the conferences we go to that are more national, that are bringing really cutting edge entrepreneurial type lawyers there. And you're learning about different technology, different vendors, different approaches that nobody locally is talking about. And it's really, eye-opening, and it's really cool to hear about these things, 6 months, 2 years before it trickles down to the sort of the larger local bar.
Yeah, on operations and marketing side, that's huge. It's not real high to get over that bar that's set in your smaller town or local town if they've never even heard of it before. So you can start doing here, and then that becomes the new expectation rather than what everybody else is doing. Even going back to direct mail or doing something like some of the vendors who handle some of the retargeting and all the digital stuff. That's an interesting concept. And I could probably throw a rock from my office, and there's probably 30 lawyers around here, okay, and none of them have probably even heard of some of that stuff. And just doing just that little 1% better every day just doing a little bit more than they do gives you that edge to get those clients, et cetera. So.
It's funny. Obviously, digital and AI, and there's all these really cutting edge things, but then there's also, going back to the past. And you mentioned the direct mail, and Ben Glass and his group. That's I call that sort of a cornerstone piece, a cornerstone teaching. And so I came back here to Atlanta, and I'm sending out my monthly print newsletter, and I get probably 30 or 40 of them, mostly from people that are in that group. I get all theirs. Yeah. And I've gotten all these comments like, wow, this is such a great idea. Nobody does this. And I'm like, everybody does it. Well, the people that we hang around with, almost everybody does it. But you forget that most people don't do that kind of thing. And that's just one example. There's hundreds of examples. And if you come back and do it, it will put you ahead of everybody else.
I remember as a kid, my dad, who did church sound systems, in the part of his low voltage contract, but he had somebody publish this newsletter. I remember going through them because we had to bind them up and send them back to the publisher or whatever, and they got returned. But he sent them to all the little churches around Southwest Georgia where he was at. And he would get calls from all these music people to get, sales and all that kind of stuff because he was the guy sending out the information, And I go back to thinking like, really, that was 40 years ago, and now I'm like working on my newsletter right now, So it's crazy that is still established after that long. He'd been doing it.
It's another story. I'll probably get this wrong, but my friend Tim Simmelroth, who has been in the glass world forever, he's sort of rolled out a little bit, but he tells a story about birthday cards. And there's some guy, I don't know if it was a life insurance or some sort of guy that when he was 12 years old or whatever, started sending him a birthday card every year. Mm-hmm. And he's like, for 20 years, he's like, I still remember that guy's name. He's like, I'll never forget because I get a birthday card from that guy every year. Yeah. And so especially, birthday cards, I wish I was a little better about that. But, once you get our age, how many people actually tell you happy birthday? Yeah. Not many. Not many.
I think your family remembers, right?
Yeah. You hope they remember.
I always end up in a trial on my birthday here. The way the court calendars go. It seems like every year I've had a trial, but it's fun. But you're right. We send out some birthday cards, and if we forget, I just have to make sure, they're all still legit, to make sure everybody's still with us, all that kind of stuff. But we do it. We all sign them too, so it's kind of a cool thing. But.
Nice. All right, man. So as we start to wrap up here, like I've said, you've had great growth over the last number of years. As you look forward, what's next? What's the vision for the future? Where do you want to see your firm go?
Well, we've implemented EOS, or we begun that, and I really like to fill those seats. My kids I got one a freshman in college, one that's going to be a senior in high school, and a 13-year-old son. And the first 5 years, I just wanted to make payroll and create the firm, right? And then now I'm on a mission to create a really sustainable firm that my kids can come back. If they end up going to law school, I'm not pressuring them to do it, but if they do, they've got something they can come back to. And then something, at the end of the day, we can look at and be really, really proud of. Try some cool cases, get involved with some cool lawyers, and just have a lot of fun doing it. So that's kind of my goal. We're on the sustainable law firm path, and we're going to keep shooting for it and keep going at it, at least for at least the next 10 or 15 years that I know of, so hopefully longer.
Well, you've done a great job, and I know you'll keep doing it, so congrats on what you've done. So people out there, if they want to get in touch with you, they got a case, they know somebody that's driving up 75, you got in a wreck, and they need a local lawyer so they don't get home cooked.
Yeah.
What's the best way to find you?
Well, they can find us on the web, obviously, rodfirm.com, and Rod is with 2 Ds, RODDFIRM.com. We're on LinkedIn as well, Facebook, Instagram, but either way, get on our website or call us up, 229-421-7777. So we're happy to help you any way that we can. And if we can't help you, we'll provide the way we can.
All right, Chris, thanks again for coming on, man. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.